Good day, this is Job Aguas, and welcome to my lectures in Philosophical Anthropology. And right now we are on the last part of our discussion on the topic man as an intersubjective being. And for this discussion, for this last part, we are going to discuss Karl Wojtyła's notion of participation and the common good. So, what is this participation? Karl Wojtyła, as we have already discussed in the previous discussions or lectures, discussed the subjectivity of man and connects it with action. According to Wojtyła, we can understand the subjectivity of man or what the human person is by discussing or through the notion of action or human action. Now, action can also be done or is done with other people. So we don't just act, we also act together with others. And he connects this acting together with others to participation. So in the common and everyday usage, when we say participation, we more or less mean having a share or part in something. Okay. So we participate when we take part in a discussion or in a meeting. We participate when we give our share in a project or in a task. We participate, for example, in a discussion in a lecture like this. However, for Wojtyła, participation has a deeper meaning. It has a more significant meaning. It's not just a form of interaction. He relates participation to our experience of acting together with other persons. So acting together, which is with others, becomes the basis of intersubjectivity or intersubjective relation. For example, when we work for a common project or when we coordinate our efforts and activities, of course, to achieve a particular goal or purpose, we participate in the group activity. And in the process, we experience intersubjectivity. So, for Wojtyła, participation or intersubjectivity, rather, is experienced through acting together for a common purpose. But this is just one aspect of our intersubjective relation, because for Wojtyła there's another dimension which for him has a deeper meaning. It's a deeper meaning of participation. Participation is not only limited to acting together with other people or that we participate in an activity for a common good, because we can also participate in the humanity of other people or of the other person. So in this kind of participation, we develop or we form an interpersonal relationship. So if we can say that participation through a common activity for the common good, for the common purpose, is one kind of intersubjectivity which we can actually call social participation. There's also a personal participation that is in the personal level, that is when we participate in the humanity, in the humanness of the other person. Okay. So this is, of course, similar to the distinction made by Martin Buber between the social and the interpersonal or the interhuman. And Wojtyła, in fact, has also his own notion of the I-thou relation, which we are going to discuss later in this discussion. So let's focus on one very important concept related to participation, and that is the notion of the common good. When we act together with others for a common purpose, we consider the common purpose as a good. So the common goal is a common good. So it's a common good because it's a good common to all. This good that is common to all is a value that all members of the group recognize, and something that will enhance their own individual goods. So there is, of course, our personal goods, our individual goods, and there is the common good. And according to Wojtyla, when we work for the common good, it must enhance our individual goods as well. So without this common recognition of the value of the common good, the members of the group will not work or act together. So it's because of the common goal, the common good, that we act together. So it is the common good that recognizes a value that unifies all the members. Okay, it unifies all the members and get them together for a common purpose. So a group becomes a unity. Okay, it becomes a unity. It acquires a dynamic sense of the recognition of the common good. It is the common good which is the basis of the group's dynamic unity. Okay, so dynamic because it is something that it keeps going. Okay, so Wojtyla calls this group, which is the which is composed of the plurality of subjects, as a community. Okay, so the group is a community. Not every grouping, for example, will be a community. There may be a group of individuals, for example, waiting for a ride, or in a public place, there may be a group of people converging together. But if they don't have a common purpose, a common good, then you can consider it as a community. So you can have a class, but if the class is not working together, they don't recognize the value of the common good, then you cannot consider the class as a community. So a community is not just a group of individuals. It is not just a plurality of subjects. What defines the community, according to Wojtyla, is the dynamic unity of the members because of their recognition of the value of the common good. So, for example, during this time of pandemic, if your neighborhood is united, they work for something, they work for their own protection. It's a recognition of common good. If you stay home because you want to promote the good of all, to save lives to other people, especially the frontliners, then the act of staying home is an act of being one with the community. It's a manifestation of our unity with the community. Now, Wojtyla explains common good in two senses: the objective and the subjective. In the objective sense, common good refers to the good of the community, meaning the goal itself. Okay, the goal of the common of the community so, for example, the welfare and well-being of the family, peace and order in the society. At this time of pandemic, that we work for the safety of everyone. So it's something that is a goal to be achieved, or say we work together to find a cure for this pandemic, for this disease. That's the objective sense, and that is the more known sense of the common good. But according to Wojtyla, there is another sense of common good, which is actually more important, and that is the subjective sense of common good. The subjective sense is that which conditions and initiates each member of the group to act together, to participate in the activity. So it's an inner drive. Okay, it's an inner drive. It's an inner sense. It's the inner desire to participate in the activity. Right. So when members take upon themselves the common good and make the effort to act together, then the common good is not just something that is external and must be attained. It is taken as something that is felt and recognized. And the conditions the members of the group to act together. So it is in this sense that we can say that the common good corresponds to the social nature of man. The common good in the subjective sense is the principle of correct acting together, the correct participation. And this allows a person to act together with other persons to perform authentic, authentic participation and attain self-fulfillment in the communal action. So the common good, therefore, is or should be understood only as a goal of acting together. It should not be understood only as a goal of acting together, but more importantly, as something that binds the members of the group to be together, to act together with others. So we can also say that objectively, the common good is something that is external, okay? And subjectively, the common good is something that is internal, something that is felt, all right? Of course, both objectively and subjectively, the common good binds us together because objectively we are looking at a common direction, but subjectively we share the same enthusiasm, the same the same desire, right? And I think uh, if there may be an objective common good, if there's no subjective sense of the common good, then we will not act together. I think in during this time of pandemic, everybody is saying that we should do this, we should do that. The government has, set a goal, for example. But if Filipinos, if we do not feel, that sense, no, that desire to participate to achieve the common good, then there will be no unity. Okay? There will be unity, and if there's no unity, then there's no community. So let's discuss deeper the notion of community. The terms community and society in some instances may be used interchangeably. However, the two realities, though they may be made up of the same elements, they are not identical. A community is more fundamental than a society because it is by virtue of the community, the members of that particular social group, that a group may be considered a society. So a community becomes the basis of the society. The community then is the very foundation of a society. Of course, we can say, well, what about the family? Well, the family is a community. Okay? The community. So the basis of the community is the participation of the personal subjects or members. And if this participation disappears, then the community disappears together with it. So there should be a participation, a personal participation, so that the community can exist. In other words, without participation of the individual members of a community, the, the community cannot exist. And if there's no community, there's no society. Without participation, the human person can be alienated from the society. That's why the opposite of participation is alienation. Participation, in a very general sense, is coming together. Alienation is being separated and being alone. So let's go now to the another dimension of community because, well, we can say that there is the social dimension of the community, but there's also the interpersonal dimension. And we're going to discuss first the interpersonal, the I-thou relation, which to some extent very similar to Uber. So Wojtyla distinguishes two dimensions of human community. The social dimension, that is, we participate in the life of the social community, and is signified by the relationship we relationship, and the interpersonal or the interhuman dimension, That is when we participate in the humanness of the other person. And this is signified by the I-thou relation. So very similar to the distinction made by Buber, the I-thou as interpersonal or interhuman, and the social, the we relation. So the family and the school belong to the social dimension, and the relationship between husband and wife, or the relationship between parent and children, or the relationship of friends belong to the interpersonal dimension. In our life as human persons, from our early beginning and through our long development, our whole existence is immersed in these two dimensions of community, the social and the interpersonal. In fact, we come into being because of these dimensions of community, and we live our life within these two dimensions. There is the social dimension of the of our neighborhood, for example, of our school, uh, of the association we belong to. And there is the interpersonal relation that exists among the members of the family or between our friends or among friends. So, uh, in intersubjectivity, the I and thou are related terms. This means that a person becomes an I in relation to the other, and the other is called the thou. Of course, uh, the other can also is also an I in itself, and I will appear as a thou to him or to the other. There can never be an I without the thou. Okay, so the I is a person. A person cannot be an I if he's not related to any person. So the other is called thou in relation to me as an I. So he can also be he is also an I in himself. And again, I will appear as a thou to him. Now, the I is a concrete human person, a human subject, unique, unrepeatable, rational, self-determined, exercises his own freedom. The thou, like the I, is also a someone, a concrete human person, unrepeatable, unique, rational, self-determined. Hence, at the very starting point of the I-thou relationship, there is already a plurality, at least two persons who are unique in themselves, two unique subjects. The I-thou relationship, although addressed to only one person, of course, can be directed to all other human beings. So our thou can be our friend or friends, a classmate or classmates, our parents, our sibling, teacher, etc. If the I connects to many, then it is no longer a relation to the thou, but it becomes a we, which can be resolved into a member of relations to different thous. Okay? Of course, in the we relation, there can exist an I thou relationship. Now, aside from the interpersonal, there is the social dimension of community. And this is expressed by the term the we. The we relationships indicates the social dimension of the community. So the I thou relations uh, is directed to the individual persons and indirectly to the multiplicity of the human persons joined by other in that relation. The we, on the other hand, refers directly to the multiplicity or plurality of the persons or the group itself, and indirectly to the persons belonging to the plurality or to the persons belonging to that group. So the I thou directly to it's everyone and indirectly to the plurality. The we directly to the plurality and indirectly to every person in that group. This is what Wojtyla calls a communitas, a social community. The dimension which embraces a larger member of persons. So the we primarily signifies a group of persons which may be called by different names like a society, an association, you know, um, what else? A country, a nation, etc. The we relationship all allows people to be regarded as belonging to this or that social community, or that particular class, or that particular team, etc. In a sense, the we indicates a dimension of community that differs from the interpersonal dimension of the I thou relationship. So, since the we is the multiplicity of the I's or different persons, it can be conceived and understood through its own activities or through activity. In other words, the we relation is a multiplicity of human individuals who exist and act together or in common with one another because of a common goal. But to act together does not or must to act together uh, uh, does not mean that we are involved or engaged in a common activity, like being side by side, like for example, a crowd walking towards the same direction. So they may be engaged or involved in a common activity. They are walking towards the same direction. Or maybe all of them uh, looking at the approaching LRT or train, all of them trying to get a ride. That's not a community. It's not a we relation. So it may be doing the same, activity, but such crowd cannot be called a social community. To act together means that the activities and the lives of each persons involved in such activity are related to a single value, which is the common good. And they have to act together for that common good. Okay? So if they are just walking towards the same direction, but they are not acting together, they're not helping one another. In fact, they may be competing with one another, or everyone is trying to take a position so that he gets inside the LRT first, ahead of the others. Then you cannot call that a community because they are not acting together. Okay? In fact, the goal may be the same, but it's not really common because when you say common, you have to act. You have to act together. There should be I mentioned a dynamic unity. Okay, and they should not work for their own individual good alone. A group of people may be, doing the same thing, but they are acting for their own personal goods. And therefore it cannot be considered a community because they are not acting for the common good. Okay, so the big community can be quantitatively diversified. It could be few, like a family, very basic. It could be as many as in the case of an association, or it could be millions in the case of a nation, or billions in the case of the human race. And the concept of the common good in relation to the multiplicity is analogous by proportionality. And the reality of this good is subject to differentiation. Because these different communities, they have their own respective common good. The family has its own common good. All right? So in a society, the society has another common good. And of course, there is another common good that involves the whole human race. Okay? So the way dimension of the community is also, to some extent, is analogous to the multiplicity, okay, of these different communities. However, Wojtyla clarifies that in relation to this to this um, to the common good. The realization of these types of we communities. No? The common good corresponds to the transcendence of every person in the forms and forms the objective basis for their constitution as a social community of the we. So regardless of, this multiplicity, regardless of whether it's many or few, the common denominator is the common good, because the common good forms as the basis of any social community of the we. Now, the notion of the neighbor. The interpersonal and the social dimensions of intersubjectivity allow us to understand the meaning of neighbor in relation to a fellow member. So these are two concepts, the neighbor and the fellow member. The notions of neighbor and fellow member in a social community are related, and sometimes they overlap each other. In some sense, they agree because a fellow member in a social community is also a neighbor. The neighbor is not one who resides beside us. The neighbor is not the person who is in the next house or in the next door. That's not the sense of neighbor that Wojtyla is talking about. Okay? It has a deeper meaning in the context of intersubjectivity. Being neighbors is more fundamental than being fellow members in a social community, because membership in a community presupposes the fact that men are neighbors. People become parts of or members of the community, and they may also cease to be a member of the community. You're a member of a class now. Next school year, you are no longer a member of the class. You're a member of this association now. Tomorrow or next year, you may not be a member of the association. You are a member of the Filipino, you are a citizen of the Philippines, so you become a member of that, of the country as a citizen, but you can opt out to not to be a citizen of the country anymore. So they can cease to be a member of the community, but they cannot cease being neighbor. Cannot cease being neighbor. It is in the sense that we can say the notion of neighbor is essentially, no, essentially at the bottom, essentially the main component, okay, the basis of the notion of membership in a community. But it's definitely different from the notion of membership in the community. So we have different notion. There is a difference between being a member of a community and being a neighbor. But what does it mean to be a neighbor? What does it mean to be a neighbor? Wojtyla used the example or used the parable of the Good Samaritan as an example to distinguish or to explain who is the neighbor. And it was, in fact, Jesus himself who said, who answered the question, who is the neighbor? So in the Gospel of Luke, we find the parable of the Good Samaritan. No? So here in the parable, we see that a man was victimized by robbers, leaving him with nothing, almost dead. And then a priest walked by, but he just looked at the victim or looked at the man and then went his way. The same thing happened with the Levite. He passed by and then just went on. And then, so if you look at the priest and the Levite, the man and the Levite and the priest, they all belong to one community. Right? They were the Jews, were the Hebrew. But they just passed by, ignore him. And then a Samaritan passed by and helped the dying man, despite the fact that the victim is not a fellow member of his community. Okay? This is The victim is a Jew, he's Samaritan. They don't belong to the same community. But the Good Samaritan recognized the humanity or the being a person of the victim, and therefore he helped him. The two others, they never recognized his humanity. They just passed by. So they failed to recognize the humanity of the victim. So, despite the fact that he, the victim, is a member of their community. So who is the neighbor? The neighbor for Wojtyla, following the example of Jesus, is the person who recognizes the humanity of the other. So the basis of being a neighbor is our common humanity, the recognition of our common humanity. So Wojtyla stresses that the notion of neighbor enables us to recognize and appreciate the value of what is in the person, independent of his being a member of a society. Okay? So being neighbors means recognizing the humanity or the humanhood, the human personhood of the other. So every human person is a neighbor as long as we recognize his or her humanity or personhood. Therefore, it is more valuable. No? Being a neighbor is more valuable and independent of his being a member, independent of our member of any society. So the basis, the only basis, is the value of the human person. So the notion of neighbor takes into account the humanness alone, okay, of the other. That humanness which is recognized, concretized in every man, just as it is concretized in myself. So the notion of being neighbors provides the most fundamental basis for the community, a basis that extends beyond any social affinity. It is a central point that unites all human beings who are even members of different communities. More than being members of separate social communities, we all share a common reality, that of a human person, a human being with equal dignity and worth. And any community that is formed not on the basis of man's humanness or personhood is devoid of any human character. Now let's go to the last part, the authentic and the non-authentic participation or attitudes of participation. Wojtyla mentioned certain attitudes that would either contribute to the participation or hinder the realization of participation. And of course, it will hinder the achievement of the common good. The authentic attitudes of solidarity and opposition certainly contribute to the realization of participation. Okay? While the inauthentic attitudes of conformism and non-involvement that will hinder genuine participation. This list is certainly not exhaustive because there may be other factors, attitudes that could be, that could enhance participation or can negate participation. So first, the attitude of solidarity. It is the attitude of constant readiness to accept and to realize our share in the community because of our membership within that particular community. So the readiness to accept, realize our share. Okay? With this attitude, we do what we are supposed to do, not only because we are members of that particular community, but because we are concerned about the benefit, about the good of the whole community. We try to look beyond our own share, our own personal interest, our own good, personal good, and contribute to the realization of the common good. This attitude will prevent us from trespassing or violating the rights of other people. It will, encourage us to respect their rights. With solidarity, there is harmony in the community, and this enables us to find fulfillment in complementing others. The attitude of opposition is not contrary to solidarity. Sometimes people have this negative interpretation or understanding of opposition. But Wojtyla is talking about a genuine kind of genuine participation, which actually confirms the common good. In genuine opposition, we voice out our opposition to a general or particular rule, not because we don't want to cooperate, or not because we want to withdraw, or not because we just want to, make a contrary position, but because we want to cooperate and work for the common good. A criticism may be an opposition, but a constructive criticism is a genuine opposition because we criticize because we're trying to look for a solution or find a right path, a right alternative to the common good. So genuine opposition is not a rejection of the common good. It's the principle of participation that seeks, a genuine role, a constructive role in the community. The intention is to have a better, a fuller, and more effective way to attain the common good and share, of course, in the communal life. So many people adopt this attitude of opposition because of their concern, deep concern for the common good. So those people who question, those people who criticize, you have to distinguish between those who are really just trying to oppose and put down other people and those that are really working for the common good. The non-authentic or negative attitudes are conformism and non-involvement. Conformism denotes a tendency to comply with others, a tendency to be neutral. In some sense, it can be constructive, but when it becomes a manifestation of servility and attitude of evading opposition because of passivity, then it becomes negative. No? So we just try to comply and comply, blind conformism. No? So an attitude of compliance or resignation, a form of passivity, which makes a person just a subject of what, because so it makes a person just a subject of what happens instead of becoming an agent of his action. So it's an indication of personal weakness, the absence of self-determination and choice. Conformism in this servile form is a denial of participation and an indication of indifference to the common good. Thus, this conformism becomes a manifestation of uniformity instead of unity. Now, non-involvement is an attitude of withdrawal and resignation. It indicates a lack of concern for participation, a characteristic of a person's absence in the community. So non-involvement is a substitute attitude for those who find solidarity difficult or do not believe in the sense of opposition. So nowadays we cannot be conformist and we cannot be uninvolved. Non-involvement, like servile conformism, is also a denial of participation and an indifference to the common good. It's an indication that the person does not want to fulfill himself through acting together with others. So in this time of pandemic, what we need is solidarity, okay, and active participation for the common good, and genuine opposition, okay, a constructive criticism that will, help us attain our common goal of getting out of this pandemic. So thank you very much for listening. Stay safe and God bless.